Lithuania has always had an outsized presence on the global stage. Since its return to independence, Lithuania has strived to build alliances, foster cooperation, and confront authoritarianism around the world. Gabrielius Landsbergis has embodied this spirit throughout his career in the pursuit of a sovereign and safe Europe to emerge as a trusted global leader. Unwavering in his commitment to the Transatlantic Alliance, steadfast in his resolve to support friends in need, and defiant against discord meant to sow distrust and weaken European alliances. Minister Landsbergis has been referred to by his peers as one of the most influential diplomats in Europe, fearlessly opposing Russian aggression and challenging China's wolf warrior diplomacy. Minister Landsbergis has repeatedly and outspokenly defended Ukrainian sovereignty. At the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, Minister Landsbergis spared no time to rally support and resources for Ukraine's defense. Today, he continues to champion the needs of the Ukrainian people and highlight the tragic costs of Russia's war in Ukraine and the inaction that enables it.
We are at war, whether we like it or not. It was not chosen by us, it was chosen by Putin. He attacked one of the European nations. That means that it also requires a European response. There's no other way. We ourselves have drawn to us red lines that we would not cross. We need to erase those. We need to make strategic dilemmas for Putin.
We are proud to present Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Lithuania, Gabrielius Landsbergis, with a Transatlantic Leadership Award for his history of service to the people of Lithuania, his support and friendship with Ukraine, and his resolute commitment to a Europe whole, free, and at peace.
Thank you so much for joining us. I have kept abreast of all your accomplishments over the last several years. And of course, since Russia's full-scale invasion, you have led not just Lithuania's incredible response in support of Ukraine and to resist Russian authoritarianism, but you have pushed the entire alliance to take steps that I think a lot of allies weren't prepared to take. Edward's point, I think, cannot be underestimated. Lithuania is not France, it's not Germany, it's not Italy. It's not one of the big countries of Europe. But with your voice, and I think your deep understanding of what it means to live under authoritarianism, you led the way for all of us to see what was really happening with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This was not just about Ukraine, this was about imperialism. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. It's wonderful to see you. Let me just kick it off into our conversation. I know you've been to Ukraine many, many times since the full-scale invasion, and you were just there earlier this month where you met with President Zelensky, and you said afterwards, I think, something really important. This is a quote, that the international community must finally commit to victory instead of expressing sympathy for Ukraine. Of course, Lithuania is living up to this commitment incredibly, not only spending and committing to 3% of GDP, but actually planning to ship an entire thermal power plant piece by piece for reassembly to Ukraine. Talk about innovation. It's incredible what you're doing. But what I want to ask you, given that everything Lithuania has done and continues to do you see unity among allies and Ukraine's partners to make similar commitments to Ukraine's victory that you have done in Lithuania?
Well, first of all, it's a great, great honor, and I'm truly humbled to be here today, so really thankful. I'm always thinking that it should be, the first people that should be here is the heroes that are fighting in Ukraine. They are, in most cases, the reason why I can be here, or most of us can be here, because they won this opportunity to victory. They won this opportunity towards peace in Europe. Again, it's it's rather difficult to hear all the nice words about the things that I do or my colleagues do or Lithuania does. Because in most cases, when we say something, it's not extremely elaborate. It's not something that requires a deep philosophical understanding. In most cases, it's just common sense and a bit of historic intuition and knowledge. And this is what probably is the most difficult thing to understand when we talk with allies, when we say that we've been here before, that this is a déjà vu moment that has happened in 2008, that has happened in 2014, that has happened in 2022, and if not handled correctly, this will happen again. I cannot find an argument how somebody would say that this is not true. This is the same Putin with same ambition, doing exactly the same thing that he's done in the past, and he's going to continue. That's as simple as it gets. And therefore, it is the most difficult task to convince your allies that we need to step up when the premise is so, well, it's so easy to understand or explain. We fared well. Somebody might have expected that we would fare worse. The amount of support to Ukraine that has been delivered is unprecedented. It has never been seen before in Europe. But the main issue here, and the main thing that Lithuanians do preach, that it's not the time to pat ourselves on the back. We're not even there halfway through. We can do that when we will be in Kyiv, all of us celebrating Ukrainian victory, and we're not there yet.
So let me just follow up on what you just laid out. You said that there's been a pattern that's emerged, and it's not new. The full-scale invasion was a surprise to many, but perhaps it shouldn't have been. Lithuania has, of course, experienced the occupation by a dictatorial state, by authoritarian state. In your history, you fought for the restoration of your independence. What do you think others don't fully understand and maybe misunderstand about Russia and its imperial instinct, if you will, who have not been the victims of it? What do you think is most misunderstood by other countries who have not experienced the kind of history that you have in Lithuania?
Well, I think it was, one might start to look at history and define the moment when Russia or Soviet Union managed to fool basically everybody else that it's not an imperial power. And we're still there. We're still trying to convince so many countries, and I'm just from New York, from Anga, where all of us who are present there, meeting with our global partners, even meeting some European states, and we're saying, Lithuania and others, we are actually a country that has been colonized. We have this memory. It's a very recent memory, and it was a brutal colonization. Enormously brutal. It was horrible, but with pictures of shiny communism, which is completely fake, they managed to convince that it's something completely different. And we're still fighting this this ghost. That countries have been subjugated, they've been occupied, and they broke free, and they rebuilt their countries, they rebuilt their states, they rebuilt their nationhoods, even cultures. It is an enormous struggle, but not everybody believes that. The notion is that Russia is somehow different. That Russia was not part of the colonial establishment of 19th century. It was. It was the only one that didn't break. Soviet Union inherited the same mentality. And unfortunately, the new re-emerged Russia inherited the same thing. And those who broke free felt it. That's why Lithuanians in 1991 said, look, we cannot trust. We cannot trust because the same people with same ideas are still there. And we were told that this is trauma, and it could be, but it's also common sense. Because we do know, we have arguments. And what we see now, we see the same instinct reemerged again. The only hope is that this time we do understand it, and we have the ability to stop it once and for all, so that the countries who surround Russia, that they would start to feel safe.
So, of course, we're talking about Russia, which presents the most immediate and direct threat to Europe and to the alliance, I think, democracy more broadly. But as you know very well and have spoken about quite frequently, democracies face a multitude of threats. Yeah. Of course, here in the United States, we have called Russia the immediate threat, but we've called China the big pacing threat. And this is part of a big policy debate, how we should, as the United States, choose, do both, or do one after the other. I think you have spoken so eloquently, and Lithuania, once again, has taken, I think, incredible steps to push back not just against Russian authoritarianism, but Chinese authoritarianism. Because the two countries really are at the epicenter of a growing alliance of authoritarianism that we face as a community of democracies. And Lithuania took bold steps by recognizing trade with Taiwan as a strategic priority. You're the first country to lead Europe in exiting the 17+1 format. And I think Lithuania has also felt the consequences of those hard decisions that you've made. You know, Beijing has unleashed a myriad of economic and coercive measures on your country. What was the advice you would have for allies? You know, allies who maybe, once again, don't see Russia and China as similar, which they're not, of course, they present different challenges. But at the end of the day, both are anti-Western, they're both anti the international rules-based order that even exists today. What are the lessons that you've learned in Lithuania from standing up to Chinese authoritarianism?
Well, I would probably use 2 points. So first point is more simple. The first country to recognize, the first democratic and recognized country to recognize Lithuania, and that's an important point, because the first non-recognized country to recognize Lithuania was Moldova. But the first recognized country to recognize Lithuania was Iceland. A tiny country in Northern Atlantic took a very bold step to recognize our independence before anybody else. And they paid a price. Moscow sanctioned them. They were unable to sell salmon to Russia, to the Soviet Union for a while, because the decision was, it was extremely early, and nobody else did that. For us, it meant the world. Every year in June, we celebrate Iceland Day in Lithuania, till this day, for 30 years. That tells you something. I don't think that there's another country that celebrates Iceland Day in the world. I might be wrong, but I mean, we have to check that. So it's also part of the credit, because what Icelanders seen in Lithuania, a struggling democracy, a very young democracy, basically months old, that's trying to emerge, that's trying to get back on the map with against all odds, against everything. It resonates, no? No? Okay. Against all odds, against everything that's happening. And they decided that there is a connection between the people that they need to, they can honor and they can support. And for many, it might have seemed provocative. For many, it might have seemed, too early, and so many other things. For us, it meant the world. And there is this thing. We do, in our hearts, in Lithuania, people do sense this urge for freedom in others. So whenever there is a revolution somewhere against a tyrant, you would see Lithuanians pulling out flags, getting together, and supporting that nation. And we've seen that with Belarus. We see now with Ukraine. We've seen that with Georgia. And we've seen, people who are protesting Chinese action in Tibet. We're seeing people protest Chinese action in Hong Kong. And it's not government organized. It's just people who support freedom. And that's part of our DNA. And that's impossible to change. That's impossible to regulate. It's just there.
Well, I don't want to boil it down to it being in your bones, but I guess that's what you're saying. And I think if we looked at, even public opinion across Europe, in Europeans' views on China, I think what you see is a very clear pattern. The countries that were part of the Eastern Bloc, that were occupied by the Soviet Union, have the most negative views of China. And I think that also tells us that once you experience authoritarianism, you feel it in your bones. Let me just ask you maybe a final question, because you really represent what is a new generation of leaders in Europe. We're actually the same age. I found that out reading your biography. And I think both of us grew up, I grew up in Ukraine until 1991, and then the 1990s were this amazing opening where millions of people got to experience democratization. But looking back now, during your lifetime, since Lithuania's restoration of independence, how would you reflect on the last 34 years? How would you define the moment that we're currently in the fight for democratic freedom? I was struck that President Biden, speaking at the UN General Assembly, really talked, I think, about this being an inflection point based on his 50 years of public service. I'm just curious how you assess the moment that we're in today. And do you think that this generation, our generation, people who are younger than us even, have the grit to do what it takes?
Well, for us in Lithuania, it's absolutely clear what is happening and what needs to be done, because we are in this amazing point in our history where we can actually cherish the victory of the fight that started in 1990, and now we're at the best point of it. We're part of NATO, we're part of EU, we're a democracy, we're recognized. We have all the possibilities, all the chances of the free world and free society, and it's just amazing. And people really, really don't want to lose it. So we're the example of what happens when the fight goes right. But it's not always. It won't be like that. The new generation, my kids, they. When I tell them about, what happened 34 years ago, for them it sounds like, look, I would listen to my parents or grandparents, the way that they used to travel to the school, all deep, knee-deep in snow, 9 kilometers. It sounded like, one of those stories. So for them, it already is different. For them, freedom is given, democracy is given, NATO, EU is given. So we have to remind that this is, that the fight is never over. We have to continue fighting. But the most important thing is, and it might sound as a platitude, but the point is that democracies will stay as strong as they will stay united. This is what Russias of the world, tyrants of the world, will try to divide us. This is their goal. They know that we are at our weakest if we're not together. If we manage, if we see the common goal, if we see the common path, I don't think that we're beatable. We did that in Cold War, we'll do that again.
Well, we have to keep fighting, I think, is the message. And I hope you're right, that we have what it takes and that we won't take the free world for granted. Mr. Foreign Minister, it's always too brief. But it's so wonderful to have you with us. Thank you so much for those inspiring words. Thank you for being an example to the rest of us here in the United States and across the democratic world. And I would like to invite everyone in joining me and giving a round of applause to Foreign Minister Landsbergis.